All right, y'all, peace and blessings. This is Christopher D. Sims here in downtown Rockford at day 6 of the teach-in, reading from Rise of the Warrior Cop. When Bill Clinton took office in 1993, crime in America was still climbing. The concept of community policing was growing increasingly popular. Ideally, community policing is the sort of thing implemented by law enforcement officials like Norm Stamper in San Diego, Nick Pastor in New Haven, and as well as Joseph McNamara in San Jose. Rather than taking a call and response approach to policing, which focuses on aspects of policing like increasing response times to 9/11 calls, cops walk regular beats. They go to community meetings. They know the names of the principals of the schools in their district. And they know and consult with community and neighborhood leaders. It's a more proactive form of policing, but one that stresses making cops a part of the police places they work. Same thing going on here in Rockford, Illinois. In 1994, Clinton started a new grant program under the Justice Department called Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS. For its inaugural year, Clinton and leaders in Congress, most notably Senator Joe Biden, funded it with $148.4 million. The next year, funding jumped to $1.42 billion, and it stayed like control of neighborhoods, SWAT raids, and aggressive anti-gang policies are also proactive. These police activities are aggressive, often violent, and usually a net loss for civil liberties, but they are proactive. When Clinton, Biden, and other politicians touted the COPS program, they did so with language that evoked the Peace Corps approach, though both Clinton and Biden also supported policies that promoted militarization. Although Clinton described the goal of COPS as building bonds of understanding and trust between police and citizens, it wasn't clear if he or any other politician really believed this. The majority of the funding on COPS grants were given simply to hire more police officers. The program said little about how those officers should be used or what sort of attitude they should bring to the job. Moreover, while Congress regularly makes federal funding contingent on states passing a particular law or policy, think speed limits or drunk driving laws tied to federal highway funding, it's more difficult to dictate how a police department puts a big federal grant to work in day-to-day operations. And so the COPS program threw billions at police departments under the pretenses of hiring whistling, baton-twirling officer-friendlies to walk neighborhood beats, rescue kittens, and maybe guest umpire the occasional Little League game. Many police agencies were actually using the money to militarize. One of the first to notice that was going on was Portland journalist Paul Richmond. The unfortunate truth about community policing as it is currently being implemented is that it is anything but community-based. Richmond wrote in a 1997 article for the alternative newspaper PDXS. Instead, he wrote in Portland the grants had resulted in an increased militarization of the police force. Richmond also found in Portland that, ironically or perhaps not, a federal program touted as a way to encourage local police to get more involved with local communities was actually federalized local law enforcement. At the same time, Clinton was pushing COPS. The administration and Democrats in Congress were pushing policies like troops to cops, bills, management, training programs for police agencies based on federal models of policing, and a bill that would allow local police departments to fund community policing programs that, with asset forfeiture money obtained through the Justice Department's equitable sharing program. The program that allows local police departments to ignore state forfeiture laws by teaming up with the federal government. Another bill would have established a 2,500-person federal rapid force, essentially a small standing army that states and cities could call upon to swoop in for special crime and drug fighting missions. The same bill would also have directed yet more funding to create joint federal, state, local anti-drug task forces. Richmond found that while the overall cops to citizens ratio fell in the early 1990s, in Portland between 1989 and 1994, the number of progressives in the city were embracing the community policing plan based on little more than the pleasant sounding name that it was coming from a Democratic administration in Washington and administered by a progressive city government. The devil was in the details, and no one had bothered to look at the details. Little of this would have surprised Peter Kraska, one of the police departments, he surveyed that had a SWAT team that also claimed to place high emphasis on the democratic approach to community policing. Kraska found that when most law enforcement officials heard community policing, they thought of the militarized zero-tolerance model. To them, the idea of a police agency simultaneously militarizing and implementing community policing policies was perfectly reasonable. In fact, 2 out of the 3 departments Kraska surveyed said that their SWAT team was actually part of their community policing strategy. Surprising as that may seem at first glance, it went hand in hand with the increasing use of these tactical teams for routine patrols. In 2001, a Madison Capital Times investigation found that 65 of Wisconsin's 83 local SWAT teams had come into being since 1980, 28 of them since 1996, and 16 in just the previous year. In other words, more than half of the state's SWAT teams had popped up since the inaugural year of the COPS program. The newer tactical units have sprung up in absurdly small jurisdictions like Forest County, population 9,950, Makwenango 7,519, and Rice Lake 8,320. Many of the agents who populated these new SWAT teams, the paper found, have been hired with COPS grants. A local criminologist was incredulous. Community policing initiatives and stockpiling weapons and grenade launchings are totally incompatible. Perhaps that was true in theory, but not in how community policing was being practiced. Of course, burn grants and $1 million. Columbia County alone, home to all of 52,000 people, made out with 5,000 military items valued at $1.7 million, $1.75 million. Some of the bounty was benign, items like computers and office equipment, but it's also included 11 M16s, 21 bayonets, 4 bolts, a periscope, and 41 vehicles, one of which was converted into a mobile command center for the SWAT team. Columbia County also received counter-surveillance equipment, cold weather gear, tools, battle dress uniforms, flak jackets, and chemical suits. The county put its tactical team to use by sending in to weed stock, quote unquote, nearby Sauk County, an event cops in full SWAT attire intimidatingly stood guard while hundreds of young people gathered peacefully to smoke marijuana and listen to music. Moreover, the Capital Times found that the state distributed the burn grants, COPS grants, and black law enforcement grants it received from Washington to local police agencies based solely on their drug policing tactics. The size of the disbursements was directly tied to the number of city or county drug arrests. Each drug-related arrest are not only rare, they don't bring in any additional money. Drug raids bring in some more federal funding, plus the possibility of asset forfeiture, all in the name of community policing. During 2008, the 2008 campaign, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, but especially Biden, credited the COPS program and the reason behind America's historic crime that began in 1994 as the reason behind America's historic. Democratic chairman of the House Subcommittee on Crime, during a question and session, someone asked about community policing and the possibility of restoring full funding to the COPS grants. The Bush administration had phased the program out. Everyone seemed to be in favor of the Peace Corps model of community policing. And they also seemed to believe that this was the COPS grants were funded or being funded. Pointing to the Madison Capital Times investigation and Crassus research, I Christopher D. Sims. Thank you. That's my time. Christopher D. Sims. Peace. I'm out.